Hey folks, Doug Blake at Body Design University. In this video, I want to answer a very specific question that a student had asked me. It's in chapter 11 and it's on ventilatory threshold. Now, uh, for the most part, the question is how do you simplify the explanation? Because there are, still folks that ask me, what does ventilatory threshold actually mean? What is it? Why is it tested? Why is it perhaps a better way to test aerobic training levels, aerobic capacity, endurance, yada, yada. It's a good question, and perhaps there's an easy way to explain it. I want to kind of go into it with you based on NASM's explanation of it. And they actually do a very good job of really simplifying what ventilatory threshold is. And number one, just so you know, it is probably if you're going to use the different testing methods that are out there to determine, uh, where somebody is from an aerobic capacity standpoint. VT or ventilatory threshold testing is probably going to be one of the better ways to do it. It is relatively easy. And that's why it was a good question. How do you explain it? How do you do it? And that's why I want to kind of go over this with you. It's probably if you can do it, right? And if you do it correctly, it's a really good, accurate way to determine where an individual is at. And we're using a ventilatory threshold normally to determine our training zones, right? So the amount of time we're going to train, at what level of intensity we're going to train at. VT or the ventilatory threshold, particularly VT1, is going to be the one of the better ways to do it. Now, there's also a little bit of a issue with doing a VT1 field tests, which is that yeah, it does take a little bit of time, and there's a little bit of sort of art to doing it with an individual. But again, if you do it properly, it's generally going to be a really good go-to method. In other words, if I can determine for my client, whoever that is, if I can determine accurately or with, fairly accurately what heart rate corresponds to their ventilatory threshold one and two, VT2 if needed. So if I can accurately determine whether it's 110 beats per minute where they hit their ventilatory threshold one, or it's 120 beats per minute versus 105 or whatever that number is, the more accurate I can assess that, probably the more I should say that shouldn't say the more I can help somebody, but the more accurate I'm going to be in how I determine their training protocol for cardio respiratory training. So that's all. So it is a good area in chapter 11, particularly these assessment. It is a good area to spend some time and study. And that's why when I'm asked this question, exactly what is it? Why is it really important? Should I really be doing it? Because obviously there are lots of assessments or a number of assessments here that you may or may not want to be doing with your clients once you're training folks. But this one, yeah, like I say, if you can do it and you can do it effectively and accurately, it's not a bad assessment um, to have and then utilize in your training protocols. For athletes, it can be extremely beneficial, very helpful, because generally you're not just doing your VT1 testing, you're doing a VT2, so ventilatory threshold two, which is going to give you another biomarker that can be really, really helpful, especially for athletes in particular, because then we can do lactate buffering training and some other more advanced training protocols with our clients. So on page 375, if you go there, just want to give you a brief explanation of how NASM explains it. And again, if you understand it, it starts to really make sense that it can be a really important biomarker for you to utilize when you're actually now training somebody. So the VT1, it's a incremental test, and of course, this is where we have some issues because I've seen many trainers, many folks that would do this, but they don't do the test properly. They don't do an incremental test that gets an individual to their steady state heart rate, elevated heart rate levels, and then start to incrementally increase heart rate until they get to an accurate measure of their VT1. So it's an incremental test performed on any device. In other words, you do it on a treadmill, you can do it on a bike. Yes, in the literature, for sure, there are potential issues with using like a UB if you're going to use the bike ergometer on legs, or you use the hand ergometer. You could technically do it, because as long as you can get the heart rate up and you can check where these changes occur in respiration, technically you can find the VT1. But ideally, it's going to be on like a treadmill or a bike ergometer that it gradually progresses in intensity, right? And relies on the interpretation of the way a person talks to determine a specific event at which the body's metabolism undergoes a significant change. In other words, you can tell when a person has reached their ventilatory threshold, 1 and 2, by the way, they breathe. And that's it. You are literally interpreting the breathing mechanism and checking the heart rate at that when that breathing mechanisms of breathing change, and right at that point there is a heart rate associated with that change, and that's what you're looking for. So a specific event at which the body's metabolism undergoes a significant change, and that body's metabolism undergoing significant change is specifically when the body at that point has shifted into 50% usage of glucose. And obviously, this is in the muscular system, and 50% fatty acids. You can understand why, although it is a really good, if it's accurate, a really good measure of these metabolic changes, technically it's really hard to notice those changes if you're not actually measuring levels of glucose use or free fatty acid use inside muscles. Just keep in mind, this has a lot to do with muscle fiber typing and what type of muscle fibers are being used at these specific instances of activity. So a key point for this protocol is to remember that it's an aerobic test. It's an aerobic test that aims to estimate, see, here we are, estimation. So how accurate is an estimate of the body's usage of a balance of fuels, 50% fat, 50% carbs. Now, yes, technically, that's a correct statement, fat and carbohydrates. The problem is that in the true explanation of VT, the real usage fuels that we're talking about are free fatty acids moving through beta oxidation, right? And then the use of glucose. I know it's carbohydrates and glucose is carbs, but sometimes it's better to speak to a more precise explanation of what fuels are being used. We're talking about free fatty acids that are being converted through the process of beta oxidation inside specific muscle cells at the mitochondria and through the Krebs cycle to produce ultimately acetyl coenzyme A, like I said, and that's going to push those fuels into the ETC or electron transport chain. That's going to provide, and that's termed fat, right? We're burning fat as a source of fuel. It's not really precise enough, and it should be more precise, especially if you're a fitness professional. It's good to know these things. Carbohydrates, well, that doesn't help me, because at the muscular cellular level, there's glycogen stores, and then there's the use of glucose. Okay, glycogen is just a storage form of glucose. So 50% carbs, it's glucose. And that's, in my opinion, that should be the term that is used. Because it is an aerobic test, I'm still reading from that second paragraph, steady state, and it's in bold. That means it's important to know this. Steady state heart rate must be attained before any assessment of talking is collected. Here is the issue that I have seen, and improper testing protocol technique is right there. In other words, you don't simply put somebody on a bike and have them start pedaling and then have them start talking. And then 10 seconds later, when they're starting to breathe heavy, a little bit heavy, you're like, okay, bingo, that's their VT1. That's not how the test is done. I'm not saying you can't get a fairly close assessment with that, perhaps, but that is not the correct protocol for the testing. That is key. It must be attained before any assessment. So steady state heart rate, which means, and that's why when you come down to the VT1 test instructions, it's important to follow the guidelines that NASM is putting in here. So you know, if you're going to do this, you want to actually do it correctly, because the precision that you attain by doing the protocol properly is what allows you to do it consistently time after time after time. Okay. Any type of assessment that you do, in order for it to have any level of accuracy, it needs to be done the same way, ideally exactly the same way, same time of day, same equipment, all those things, all those variables should technically be exactly the same from one assessment time to the next. And so that's all, that's really all you're trying to do here. So you must reach a steady state heart rate. In other words, the client has to be doing whatever they're doing. And when their heart rate gets up to 100, 105, 110 beats per minute, it maintains at whatever that number is, at 110 beats per minute. It'll go down to 109. It'll go up to 111 within 1 or 2, 3 heartbeats, but it is steady state. Once that is attained, now you can start moving into the actual protocols, which you'll see on the next page. And then of course it'll take you to VT2. And no, I'm not going to go over the protocol. It's pretty straightforward, because on table 1117, there's an example of your VT1 test with a 1-minute incremental increase. So you can read through that. Very simple, very, like I was saying earlier, it's not a difficult field test to run. It really isn't. It's actually very simple. You just got to actually go through and you got to time it. So if you're doing 1-minute incremental increases, matching steady states, and then you're checking the breathing, right, of your client, you can get it right. Okay. And so that's how you would do VT1. Now, of course, NASM will tell you it's not necessary to do VT2 unless you have an individual that is that has some other goals higher than just fat loss or standard increases in total cardiorespiratory fitness and capacity. People get into the VT2 level all the time because they train really hard. So high intensity interval training during the cardiorespiratory component of your training, people are going to be getting into VT2 all the time. So if you want to do a VT2 field test, sure, go for it. You just got to be very, very careful. That's why NASM, they did a good job. Make sure you understand why you're doing the VT2 test. And yes, the less fit an individual is, the sooner they will reach those higher levels of heart rate attainment. And that's kind of the point here. So they give you, I mean, look, it's in summary form, literally 1, 2, 3 pages, everything you need to know on how to run a proper ventilatory threshold testing protocol. Look at it, use it. Like I say, it is a good way, if you're doing it correctly, to have more precision in your heart rate based training. It doesn't mean that other methods for using heart rate are not effective. Of course they are, right? There's nothing wrong with using color coded 60 to 70, 80, 80 to 90% of predicted max heart rate. They're all good. It's motivating. It helps the average person. But if you want to precise and accurate in how you do like your zone training, right? Zone 1 is below VT1, at or below VT1. Zone 2 is between VT1 and VT2. Remember, those are heart rates. When we say ventilatory threshold 1, we're talking about a specific heart rate. That is the crossover line where you move from this metabolic state that you're in, right, from exercise perspective, to this metabolic state. It occurs when your heart rate reaches 117 beats per minute. All of a sudden, your body shifts over at 117 beats per minute Fuel usage, 50% glucose into normally type, the type 2 fibers with type 1 fiber usage. And there's some type 1 fiber now usage, even more, with 50% usage of free fatty acids as a source of fuel. So that 50-50 point, that's going to be reflected in how hard you breathe. That's what VT is doing. So the talk test, things like that, correlate to your ventilatory threshold. Again, this video, I wanted to explain it, hopefully in a way that makes it very simple to understand not only what it is, but why you would do it. And the answer to that, of course, is it's more precise. It really is. Knowing that your zone training protocols occur when your heart rate is below a specific number, above, and then right getting to VT2. If you know those numbers, you can be more precise in your training. That's all it is, and or with your client's training. And so there you go. So if that was helpful, please let us know by typing the word understand in the comment section below. As always, please subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so, and let us know how we can be of assistance. Hope this was helpful. Have a great week. We will see you next week. Thanks.